What is going on, fight fans? So here we are with the second episode, the top 5 modern legends that we need in esports boxing club. Now, keep in mind, I use the word need very loosely because we don't need anybody, but these people will definitely help continue to sell the game, just like my last top 5 list of the current fighters. So without any further ado, let's get into it. This is Edward, and you're watching Boxing Fanatico. Just like my last list of current fighters, this is super hard to do. It's so difficult to sit down, try to write a list of just 5 people in a pool of like hundreds of people. So I put a little bit of a criteria. They couldn't have fought past the 90s, and they could be fairly recent to be part of this modern legends thing. And they have to move the needle. They have to be fighters that can get you more sales, not just like an added thing that could be like, oh, that's cool. I'm talking about needle moving type modern legends. And then after this one, we're going to go ahead and do legends like just full blown, even, black and white type legends. That'll be the final video in this 3-part series. But I digress. Let's go ahead and talk about number 5, Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis was an amazing fighter, being able to beat both Vladimir and Vitaly Klitschko at the heights of his career, and also being able to take out Mike Tyson. Now, of course, Mike Tyson was gearing towards the tail end of his career, but it's no secret that Lennox Lewis is beloved by many and considered one of the best heavyweights of all time, and definitely considered to have one of the best jabs of all time. Lennox Lewis is essentially a household name. So if you get Lennox Lewis in here, he definitely moves the needle, and he's from the UK. It's like a perfect relationship coming together. A UK developer and Lennox Lewis in a boxing simulation video game. What more can you ask for? Now moving on to number 4, Prince Naseem Hamed. Now, Prince Naseem Hamed had an insanely unique style, a very braggadocious and risky style. Well, he would have his hands down multiple times. He would do unorthodox type attacks that came from so many different angles, but he would carry so much power in his attack. And because of his unorthodox style, he was incredibly difficult to read, but incredibly entertaining to watch. There have been many fighters that kind of incorporate this very unorthodox and awkward style, such as Emmanuel Augustus and even Roy Jones Jr. But the way Naseem did it, it seemed like artistic ballet on steroids. He was a master at it. And up until his fight with Marco Antonio Barrera, he really proved that that incredibly risky yet entertaining style could take him a very long way. But I believe that if you add someone like Prince Naseem, you definitely will move more copies than without him in the game. So that is why Prince Naseem is number 4. Moving on to number 3, the Golden Boy, Oscar De La Hoya. I mean, there's nothing much you can say. He basically monopolized the late 90s as being the most popular boxer at the time. Was he the best fighter? No, he would lose fights with Shane Mosley and Bernard Hopkins and even Felix Trinidad as his first loss, but he was still incredibly popular and must-see TV. He was a pay-per-view megastar and held that torch for a long time. Oscar De La Hoya is still popular till this day, and many of the Mexican fans still adore and love the Golden Boy. If Oscar De La Hoya is added to this game, he will 100% move more copies than if he wasn't added at all. Now let's go ahead and move on to number 2, Mike Tyson. Come on. Is there anything else that needs to be said about Mike Tyson? Mike Tyson clearly will sell more copies. There are 2 people that automatically sell copies of boxing video games. That's Muhammad Ali and Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson had a ferocious knockout artist style with incredibly good head movement and explosive speed that was almost unheard of for the heavyweight division that gave him that immense advantage, because he was going against people that couldn't throw as quickly as he could throw or even had the head movement that he had. He was definitely an anomaly for the sport and incredibly entertaining. He was also a pay-per-view star. There's no question in my mind that Mike Tyson will definitely move copies of the game. A lot of copies. He is like a household name. And number one. Now, number one, in my opinion, will probably move the most copies because of how polarizing he is and because of how popular he is. And that person is Floyd Mayweather Jr. It's no secret, Floyd is still popular to this day. Go on any boxing forum or any boxing group on Facebook, and all they talk about is Floyd Mayweather. They either talk about him in a positive light or they talk about him in a negative light. These boxing forums and boxing groups don't talk about any current fighters. Very seldom do they talk about current fighters. Maybe when there's a fight coming up, but usually the conversation revolves around Floyd Mayweather. Usually the videos that do the best in terms of boxing breakdowns are videos of people like Manny Pacquiao or Floyd Mayweather. You talk to the average person, you ask them who's the fighter that they know, they're going to say things like Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, and Floyd Mayweather. But at this point, where we are in terms of the ether of boxing and casual fans, there is probably no other fighter right now that can move more copies than adding Floyd Mayweather Jr. Albeit for someone to try to beat him up and finally see him get beat up, or for someone wanting to use him because that is one of their favorite fighters of all time. Whatever the case is, in recent times, Floyd has left a major mark in the boxing landscape, and there is zero doubt in my mind that he will probably move more copies than any other fighter added to this roster. So there is my top 5 list. I want to know your top 5 list. Do you agree? Do you think those were good picks or so-so picks? Are your top 5 the same as my top 5? Remember, keep in mind that my criteria is not based on the fighters that I like. If it was fighters that I wanted, you would see people like Pernell Whitaker put into the equation, but it isn't fighters that I want. It is fighters that I think would be the most popular to push the game forward. So I'll see you in the next top 5, which will be full-blown legends from the past. Until next time, this is Boxing Fanatico, and I'm out.